International Monetary Fund projects global growth of 3% to last for a period of 5 years. NMPC Limited says it welcomes House of Representatives investigation into alleged payment to ghost consultants. Debt servicing increased by 14.68% in 2022, says Debt Management Office. Oil slips as rate hike worries balance tighter supplies. The program is Business Express, reaching you from Abuja, Nigeria's capital. I am Musa Abubakar, your guide. Well, the International Monetary Fund has projected global growth of 3% to last for a period of 5 years. Managing Director IMF Kristalina Georgieva stated this at the opening of the 2023 spring meetings while speaking on the topic Building Resilience and Reshaping Development. Abolade Salami reports.
The Managing Director of International Monetary Fund, Kristalina Georgieva, said with the inflationary pressure, recovery has been elusive, thereby resulting in central banks' continuous increase in interest rates to control the trend. The transition from abundant liquidity with low interest rates to lower liquidity and higher interest rate, she added, has exposed vulnerabilities in the financial sector, thereby making task of policy making harder.
Is despite the remarkable resilience of consumer spending in the United States, in Europe, despite the uplift from China's reopening, global growth would remain below 3% as we projected it earlier this year, and what is more concerning, it would remain around 3% for the next 5 years.
In building resilience and reshaping development, World Bank Group President David Malpass says the bank is keen on paying attention on performance of the world economy, the debt problems facing developing countries, with a view to provide assistance to people around the world, and especially for people that are on the lower end of the income scale in developing countries, as well as advanced economies that are suffering from the lower incomes.
As we look at it, the elements of growth into the future, it's important that there be more investment in small businesses, in new businesses, and that means a flow of capital. And a worry that we have for developing countries is the capital inflow. The capital flow right now is out of developing countries. So there's, for many of the developing countries, it looks like they're in a phase of decapitalization rather than recapitalization.
The International Monetary Fund, in its research, says cost of trade fragmentation can run as high as 7% of global GDP over the years.
Spring meeting will be on in Washington, D.C. for the next couple of days. Business experts intend to take a look at what is expected to top Africa's as well as the world's agenda at the ongoing meetings. And to do justice to this is senior economist with SPM professional Paul Alaje. Good morning, Mr. Paul Alaje. Thanks for joining me. Okay, Mr. Paul Alaje, the IMF has projected global growth of 3% to last for a period of 5 years. What does this mean for Africa and Nigeria? Taking cognizance of the fact that Nigeria is expected, I think, to grow within 2.9%.
Yeah, thank you once again. population growth rate is at par with its GDP growth rate. In the real sense, they say there is no growth because the rate at which people are consuming the growth is also the same way as the people are growing themselves. So there is no growth in the real sense. So 3% is very poor for the continent. That is average growth rate is almost at that. Africa by now should be having double-digit growth rate, and that should last us for not less than 2 decades. China, it's a country which of course has larger population than Africa, grew for a while between 7 to 10%, and that is why China was able to lead over 200 million people out of poverty. So Africa must discuss our poverty and the way out of poverty through infrastructure, through acceleration of business transactions. This must be at the forefront. Africa must also discuss excessive loan that seems to have resurfaced in different parts of African nations. More importantly, infrastructure is one of the major reasons why Africans have not been one of the major world leaders. And I can tell you that if there are no infrastructure, there is no way any nation in Africa will be the most desirable place for people to live on earth. So it's more important. For Nigeria has some peculiar concerns. I can tell you today, and I don't know if there are other Nigerians that we are new to this, that in recent time, it's becoming even more difficult for Nigerians to live outside the territory of Nigeria because of high level of discrimination. I tell you this as a result of research, and I can tell you countries, but so that we don't cast we don't cast as fashion on any country, or it as though Nigerians have issues. But Nigerian authorities must become more sensitive in the diplomatic relationship, especially as it has to do with Nigerian business people that are operating outside the Nigerian territory, and also to make business relatively easy for Nigerians, not just in the country, but also workers and business people outside Nigerian territory. The reason is because if you don't, monies that should be repatriated to the Nigerian economy will not happen. And it will continue to affect exchange rates, adversely to continue to affect Nigerians in the wrong way. Our opinion is this, that number one, Nigeria should strive to get more growth by attracting more investment to the country. And if there are no sufficient investment and we continue to import, what we should be ready for is a further reduction in the value of our local currency. The lower it goes, the more our people will need to work before they can meet their livelihood and also be able to spend some of the money, basic amount of money to keep them alive.
Okay, this is actually happening at a time when most people are facing the cost of living crisis around the world and high inflation. What would Nigeria, how can Nigeria take advantage of these particular spring meetings to actually address some of these challenges?
Well, I think it's important for Nigerians to find its competitiveness around the world and know that now that cost of living is becoming more challenging, not just in Nigeria but to the rest of the world. We must identify what is it that we can provide to the rest of the world that is relatively cheaper for us to do, so that in the high cost we can improve supply for such and have more revenue to us as a people and to our country and our government. Unfortunately, the foundation for this has not been laid. I saw the Central Bank of Nigeria trying best possible to see how to repatriate $200 billion to the economy. How much of that has been achieved is a different ballgame. I've earlier spoken with your correspondent, and I've mentioned when that policy was initiated by the Apex Bank that this is a laudable policy with potentials. But economists does not discuss potential, we discuss actualization of policies. Therefore, the Ministry of Trade and Investment should have done more by providing necessary encouragement in the Ministry of Finance, Budget and National Planning to make sure that the intention of the FS Bank become a reality. So what should Nigeria be discussing? How do we attract more investment? How do we promote more export, maybe of natural resources, maybe it's of finished product, maybe it's of manufactured, but by all means, Nigeria must produce, Nigeria must attract more investment.
Okay, what's your view on climate change? It seems like climate change is threatening livelihoods of lots of people around the world, and Nigeria is not excluded. Nigeria is part of those who might likely be affected, because we've seen likely predictions that
climate change is already affecting us a great deal. I can tell you the flood that we have experienced in different parts of Nigeria. You saw Bayelsa, Port Harcourt, Lagos, even places that are not as common. You saw what happened in Lokoja. The impact of climate change is a 7,000 naira that added to the bag of rice, 50 kg, and never returned even when the flood receded. We are still buying now between 36,000 to 42,000 per bag of rice. That is the impact of, in case you don't know what climate change means, that price would explain it to you. So what should Nigeria do? Nigeria must ensure that it contributes less to the poor reasons why climate change is caused. But you know, there are two major countries that are the forefront of the United States and China. But for China, understand that if it stops production, then the economy will sink. The government is making critical, decision as to our people must continue to produce, even though this has negative impact on climate change. President Trump, the former president of the United States, has taken this similar position at a time when tax war was going on between United States and China. What do I think the Nigerian authorities should do? What is that thing that will reduce the impact of climate change on our people? Because you cannot be holier than thou when the major superpower around the world continue to emit reasons why there will be tremendous negative impact on the climate and be affecting the world via global warming and so on and so forth. Our job as a people is how do we ensure that even if what happens, it will not affect our farms, it will not affect our livelihood, it will not affect our economy so much. And I think that should be the position Nigeria should take because of the love of our country.
Okay, the Russia-Ukraine crisis has continued to be or make impacts affecting a lot of countries. What will Nigeria do and other African countries to build resilience and reshape development?
We need to find opportunity cost. We need to find alternative. We need to find beyond the first two that I've mentioned. The first, which is the same point, beyond what I've mentioned, African leaders must also understand that even though we live in an interdependent world, but pains are concerns varies from nations to nation. Because Russia occupied Ukraine and we saw the potency of the war going on as we speak, the truth is the world African leaders must understand that we cannot depend on Ukraine or Russia for some product anymore, or any other country. African Continental Free Trade Area should help us to become interdependent as African nations. If we don't become interdependent and we are still depending on we to come from Ukraine or to come from part of Russia, African leaders will continue to bear the pain, or at best they are people. So the price of gas has gone up. How many countries are refining crude? Because it is not weather that determines where you refine. It is technology. Of over 50 countries in Africa, with the GDP of Africa, we should for God's sake have at least 1 or 5 countries that can supply the rest of Africa refined oil. Nigeria is spending almost 20 years to react the madness of refined oil. In 2012, we heard so much about how the private refinery become mainstream. It is 10 years in January since that announcement was made by President Jonathan. President Buhari in 2016 had said Nigeria will see that refinery come mainstream in 2019. And last, the goal was changed to 2021. This is 2023. Our general election has been concluded. We still don't have it. But mark you, the 4 refinery Nigeria has is still not in place. This is why when a missile explodes in Ukraine, Nigerians, Congolese, Ghanaians are bearing the pains. What should have been confined to Ukraine? Why? Because cost of living continue to go high. I hope that leaders of these African nations will know that the kind of world we live in is one that you cannot exonerate yourself for what is happening to your neighbor, except you have provided the cushion effect or you have taken your destiny in your own hands.
Okay, one of the issues raised by IMF and World Bank is about issue of debt crisis, which is affecting a lot of developing countries. Nigeria, as we've seen this couple of days, is Nigeria's meeting its debt obligation. How do we ensure debt sustainability, and as well as expand our revenue base?
I like the way the minister has always put it, and I also like the way President Buhari submitted in 2018, I think October or November, when he presented to the National Assembly. He said the biggest crisis, which the minister of course emphasized, Nigeria has is not the next election. That was in 2019. He said the biggest crisis in our hand is the issue of revenue and extension debt.
Sorry, Mr. Alaja, I'm afraid we are running out of time. I believe this is an ongoing conversation, and we'll continue the conversation subsequently. Thank you for joining us on the program.
Thank you so very much for having me.
Yeah. Now moving on, data from the Debt Management Office shows that Nigeria's debt servicing bill went up by 14.68% to 3.36 trillion naira in 2022. According to Debt Management Office, 2.93 trillion naira was spent on external and domestic debt servicing payments in 2021. Recall that the DMO had earlier reported that Nigeria's total debt stock stood at 46.25 trillion naira as of December 2022. An analysis of DMO also showed that the country spent $2.4 billion, which was equivalent to 1.07 trillion naira using the current exchange rate of 460 naira per dollar to service its external debt last year. Domestic debt servicing got 2.56 trillion naira in 2022, with the highest expenditure of 529.88 billion naira recorded in April. The Central Bank of Nigeria will this week refinance maturing treasury bills worth 149.64 billion naira, 91-day bills, 182-day bills, and 364-day bills. Dealers note that traders' sentiment will be shaped by the Treasury bills auction results over the course of the new week. Analysts anticipate the 364-day Treasury bills rate to rise. Meanwhile, the Debt Management Office last week offered two federal government of Nigeria savings bond for the month of April at 1,000 naira per unit. According to the DMO, the first offer is a 2-year FGN savings bond due in April 12, 2025 at an interest rate of 10.033% per annum. The second offer is a 3-year federal government savings bond due in April 12, 2026 at 11.033% per annum interest rate. The NPC Limited says it received with great relief the resolution of the House of Representatives to investigate allegation of the payment of 20 billion naira to so-called ghost consultants. NPC Limited had earlier refuted the allegation as false when it was first published by an online platform without any iota of evidence. A statement by Garba Din Mohammed, Chief Corporate Communications Officer, NNPC Limited, say Under the current board and management, NMPC Limited has instituted a culture of transparency that includes making its annual audited financial statements public. He says it is in this light that the NMPC Limited welcomes the resolution of the House of Representatives to investigate what he called an outrageous allegation. NMPC Limited, according to the statement, is confident that the outcome of any investigation into the false allegation will vindicate the company and put an end to all speculations concerning the matter. Oil slipped after rising for 3 straight weeks as concerns about further interest rate hikes that could curb demand balance the prospect of a tighter market due to supply cuts from OPEC Plus producers. The US dollar rose after US jobs data pointed to a tight labor market, firming up expectations of another Federal Reserve rate hike. Dollar strength makes oil more expensive for other currency holders and can weigh on demand. Brent crude was down 26 cents at $84.86 a barrel after earlier falling $1. US West Texas Intermediate crude slipped 16 cents to $80.56. Gold falls below $2,000 as US jobs growth lifts dollar. Let's take a trip to the commodities market. Well, next is global stock market update.
European stock markets are expected to open higher across the board in a strong start to the trading week after the long Easter weekend. Stocks in the Asia Pacific mostly rose on Tuesday as the Bank of Korea held interest rates at 3.5%. In line with expectations. South Korea's central bank held rates for the second consecutive time as the nation grappled with an inflation rate of 4.2%. In Japan, the Nikkei 225 rose 1.05% to 27,923.37. Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index pared earlier gains and last traded 0.34% higher. Meanwhile, mainland China markets were mixed as the nation's inflation reading came in below expectations at 0.7%. The Shanghai Composite fell 0.05%. US stock futures rose slightly on Tuesday morning as investors look towards the release of economic data later this week. Dow Jones Industrial Average futures ticked higher by 37 points or 0.11%. S&P 500 added 0.10%, while Nasdaq 100 futures were down 0.01%. Figures are expected from the African markets after the long holiday. Bosede Able, Business Express.
Well, that's it. This is where we end this edition of Business Express. We value your feedback, so keep the comments, observations, and suggestions coming. Be informed that all previous episodes are available on YouTube on the NTA's channel. Business Express returns Wednesday by 3 p.m. I'm Musa Abubakar. Have a nice day.